In the annals of early Christianity, the role of women has often been overshadowed, minimized, or altogether forgotten. Yet, if we turn our gaze to the early days of the faith, we uncover a tapestry rich with the contributions, struggles, and spiritual leadership of women. Their stories reveal that women were not mere bystanders in the development of Christianity. They were active participants, disciples, deacons, martyrs, and teachers. Join me as we journey back to a time when the church was young and women, often forgotten by history, stood at its heart. 1. Mary Magdalene, apostle to the apostles. We begin our story with Mary Magdalene, one of the most prominent female figures in early Christianity. Contrary to the misinterpretations that would later paint her as a repentant sinner, early Christian texts show her as a devoted follower of Jesus and a woman of great spiritual insight. Mary Magdalene was the first to witness the risen Christ and was entrusted with the task of announcing the resurrection to the apostles. This earned her the title Apostle to the Apostles. In the Gospel of John, it is she who stays by the tomb, weeping, searching, until Jesus calls her by name. And it is she, not Peter or John, who first proclaims, "I have seen the Lord." Early texts like the Gospel of Mary and the Gospel of Philip further elevate her role, portraying her as a close confidant of Jesus, a woman who understood his teachings on a deep, spiritual level. These texts suggest that Mary Magdalene was respected for her wisdom and insight, at times even challenging Peter, one of the church's eventual pillars. Her prominent role in these Gospels illustrates that women like Mary were not only witnesses to Christ's message, but were seen as capable leaders within the nascent Christian community. 2. Phoebe, the deacon of Cenchreae. Traveling forward to the time of the Apostle Paul, we encounter Phoebe, a remarkable woman whose leadership in the early church is explicitly documented. In his letter to the Romans, Paul refers to Phoebe as a deacon and a benefactor of many, including himself. This is no minor designation. Being called a deacon signified a position of authority and respect within the early Christian community. Phoebe was likely responsible for delivering Paul's letter to the Roman Church. This would have required her not only to be trusted, but also to be knowledgeable enough to explain Paul's teachings and defend his message to a potentially skeptical audience. Phoebe's role as a deacon suggests that early Christian communities valued and trusted women in positions of leadership, allowing them to serve as ministers of the faith. 3. Priscilla, teacher and theologian. Priscilla, along with her husband Aquila, emerges in the Book of Acts as a significant figure in early Christian theology and missionary work. Together, they are described as close associates of Paul, working with him to spread the gospel. In some passages, Priscilla's name appears before Aquila's, which was unusual for the time and may indicate her prominence in their partnership. One of the most striking stories of Priscilla's influence is her interaction with Apollos, a learned man and eloquent speaker from Alexandria. Apollos was passionate about the message of Jesus, but had an incomplete understanding of the faith. Priscilla, along with Aquila, explained the way of God to him more accurately, Acts 18 verse 26. This account demonstrates not only Priscilla's theological knowledge, but also her authority to teach and correct even educated men within the early church. 4. Eunia, the forgotten apostle. One of the most intriguing and controversial figures in early Christianity is Eunia, a woman whom Paul refers to as outstanding among the apostles in his letter to the Romans. For centuries, Eunia's identity was obscured. Translators, uncomfortable with a female apostle, altered her name to a masculine form, Eunias, but no evidence exists of Eunias as a male name in antiquity. Recent scholarship has reaffirmed Eunia as a woman, restoring her rightful place among the apostles. As an apostle, Eunia would have been a significant figure, bearing witness to the resurrected Christ and working to spread his message. Her apostleship highlights the openness of early Christianity, where women were valued not only as followers but as leaders and missionaries. Eunia's story serves as a reminder that women were once recognized as apostles, equal to their male counterparts in authority and spiritual significance. 5. Perpetua and Felicitas, martyrs of faith. As the Christian movement grew, so did opposition, and many believers faced persecution and death for their faith. Among the earliest and most poignant accounts of martyrdom are the stories of Perpetua and Felicitas, two young women who faced death in the arena. Perpetua, a noblewoman, and Felicitas, her slave, were imprisoned together in Carthage for their refusal to renounce their Christian faith. Perpetua's prison diary, which survives as one of the oldest Christian texts written by a woman, provides a powerful and personal account of her faith journey. She describes visions, a deep sense of peace, and a profound conviction that she was following the path laid out by Christ. When her father pleaded with her to renounce her faith, she responded, "I cannot call myself by any other name than what I am, a Christian." Perpetua and Felicitas met their deaths with courage, and their story inspired generations of believers. They became symbols of unwavering faith, and their status as martyrs cemented them as icons in the Christian tradition. Their sacrifice reveals the depth of women's commitment to early Christianity, a faith for which they were willing to die. 6. Thecla, the rebel apostle. Thecla's story, found in the Acts of Paul and Thecla, portrays a young woman who defied societal norms to follow her calling. According to the narrative, Thecla was captivated by Paul's teachings on chastity and devotion to God, so much so that she abandoned her engagement and social standing to follow him. Her decision to reject marriage and pursue a life of celibacy marked her as a radical figure, challenging the expectations of women in her society. Thecla faced numerous trials, including being condemned to death for her refusal to conform, yet she miraculously survived each ordeal. The story of Thecla highlights the transformative power of faith, illustrating how early Christian women could defy even the harshest societal and familial expectations to follow a higher calling. She became revered as a model of piety and determination, and later traditions would even describe her as an equal to the apostles. 7. The house church leaders, unsung heroines. Early Christianity did not unfold in grand cathedrals, but in modest house churches, many of which were hosted and led by women. Women like Lydia, who was the first European convert to Christianity, opened their homes to the apostles and provided places of worship for the fledgling faith community. Lydia's home in Philippi became a center for Christian worship, as did the homes of other prominent women, including Chloe, Nympha, and Mary, the mother of John Mark. These women played a crucial role in nurturing the early church. They managed these gatherings, provided financial support, and ensured that the community had a space to grow. By doing so, they laid the foundations for the organized church, supporting the movement at a time when it was vulnerable and persecuted. 8. Women's wisdom, the Desert Mothers. In the centuries that followed, Christianity continued to evolve, and some women chose to devote their lives to asceticism, retreating to the desert to live in contemplation and prayer. Among these women were the Desert Mothers, such as Amma Sarah and Amma Syncletica, who were revered for their wisdom and spiritual insight. These women's teachings were preserved in sayings and stories, many of which emphasized humility, patience, and self-discipline. Amma Sarah, for example, was known for her resistance to temptation and her ability to persevere in the face of adversity. The Desert Mothers sought a life apart from the distractions of the world, modeling an alternative path of faith and inspiring others with their devotion. 9. Reclaiming the legacy of early Christian women. As we uncover these stories, we see that early Christian women held roles that were dynamic and influential, stretching from apostleship to martyrdom, from theological instruction to the creation of sacred spaces. Their stories reflect a time when women's spiritual gifts were recognized and valued, when their voices were not yet silenced by later cultural biases. Over time, the contributions of women like Mary Magdalene, Phoebe, Eunia, and others were gradually minimized, obscured, or even erased as the church became more hierarchical and male-dominated. Texts that celebrated women's leadership were deemed apocryphal or heretical, and certain interpretations emphasized patriarchal values that downplayed women's authority. However, modern scholarship has worked to bring these women's voices back to the fore. By revisiting ancient texts and considering the context in which early Christian communities operated, historians have restored a more complete and nuanced understanding of women's roles in the foundation of Christianity. Today, as we celebrate the lives of these early Christian women, we remember that their faith was not passive. It was active, courageous, and often revolutionary. They defied cultural expectations, faced persecution, and devoted themselves to a new vision of humanity and divinity. Their legacy challenges us to consider how the church might look if these voices had not been muted, if women had continued to share in the leadership of Christianity as they did in those early days. The stories of Mary Magdalene, Phoebe, Priscilla, Eunia, Perpetua, Felicitas, Thecla, and many others remind us that women have always been vital to the Christian narrative. Their courage, wisdom, and faith are woven into the very fabric of Christianity, urging us to honor their legacy and ensure their stories are never forgotten again. As we look to the future, these early female leaders call us to embrace a vision of the church that is inclusive, egalitarian, and true to the diverse voices that helped bring it into being.